The art of selection in decolonizing knowledge and the curricula for the Africa we desire. My name is Babalwa Mazingisa. I'm a student at the University of Cape Town. The opportunity to present this paper is greatly appreciated. And I can be reached with the email stated here, and I will also, with any questions or comments or feedback, and I will also write the email at the end of the presentation. The abstract of the paper is as follows. The creation of the Africa we desire is long overdue. Absolutely long overdue. Knowledge selection across discipline should be at the center of breaking down barriers with a mindfulness of the range and the diversity in doing so. In the past we had schools, colleges, universities, and universities were used for the development of colonization, of colonization, which led to the colonization of the mind, of the heart, of the human identity, and to keep the colonized in a place that is conducive for the colonizers' power development. The difference nowadays is that the mission of colonization has taken away a much subtler skin, yet intricately intertwined in elements of our daily lives, from the food we eat, the games that our children play, the access to information, and the knowledge that is promoted amongst us. Decolonization of education as a comprehensive directive has gained enough momentum across nations, from Cape to Cairo, with formalism, with formalism, which is a teacher-centered pedagogy, which is still dominant in our schools, even though we have learner-centered education, which is a preferred pedagogy, along with self-centered in our schools and university, even in our basic education and higher education institutions. This has been influenced by the continent's exposure to colonialism, with South Africa as an example. During apartheid, this was a style of teaching that was taught in teaching colleges. Therefore, this is often the traditional form of learning. Sometimes one would experience learners not responding to discussions. This is not because the learners do not know the answer, they are not innovative, they're not self-starters, but because they have been taught to wait for the teacher to feed them information. This, of course, is not the sole pedagogical paradigm, with learner-centered education paradigm being encouraged, as I've mentioned earlier. The injustice, however, which has left societies bruised with scars so deep that it is affecting how we absorb information, where we find information, how we access that information, and thus how we treat each other, nationally and internationally, inclusive of services we render to each other from one country to another, from one citizen to another. And thus this paper saw the need to critically assess, to render a critical assessment of where we are with the undertaking of decolonizing of our education system. And looking into the selection and access of knowledge material in Africa, and thus raising imperative questions. It is time we consider what Africa as modern learning system would look like, with Africa's own plans and own dreams, but still be an intricate part of the global community. Our motivation for the paper is that previous research has looked into the decolonization of education as an activity with an end result that has been complete. There's been research looking into that. It's as if that decolonization is something that we've achieved already. But I believe that we haven't achieved. It is a process that changes with time. And as the times are changing every second, we need to change with the time as well. And decolonization is far from over. The process is gonna take a longer time, and that needs a lot of us. That means we need to put our hands together from all spheres of all different kinds of industries and sectors. Need to put our hands together to achieve a free and decolonized education system. However, right now, our environment, we've realized that in order for that to happen, and the environment needs to be very conducive. But right now, the environment is challenging. We look into it because we're trying to look into access to education. While we do that, we'll try and look at video games are implicating replicas of colonized architecture, of narratives. So in a way, it's taking us back, and we need to be talking about such things. And unfortunately, video gaming has gained such great momentum, but it's one of the things that we barely ever talk about in the education industry, and how it actually impacts children, and what is in the game systems. So talking about this and assessing the state of decolonizing knowledge and the curriculum in Africa is a crucial step for the curation of a curricula that is equal, fair, and of great quality. So the paper is going to is an easy process. We're looking at the introduction, the historical narrative, the discussions, and we close it off with the conclusion. Introduction. Accessing information and knowing is an act of participation in complex social learning systems. Learning ecologies are defined as a constantly evolving activity that takes place within, between, and across spaces and contexts. The world we live in values excess and quality, from the food we eat to the clothes we wear. It is only suited that we apply the same amount of energy into all elements of learning. That includes the accessing of information and the design of the curricula, with a focus into the process of selecting the information that is accessible in society with non-discriminatory connotation, the sources and tools used to impact significantly on who has access, issues affecting how information is explored and used. This limiting factor has birthed the delusional digitization as a resourceful solution for all. Digitization is great on one hand and gives access to information that we once would be difficult or maybe not be able to access before. But at the same time, it opens the gap even more for those that, even though access is made easier, but it's made more difficult for them. So the gap becomes greater. So it's a good or bad situation, but it is not a it is a solution for some of our problems, but it's not a solution for everything. Even with the great contributions that Africa has had in various disciplines, very little recognition has been rendered in places where, we're not saying in places where Africa has had great contributions. For example, although the globe still uses in mathematics and science and some science disciplines, and mathematics, for example, it still uses Arabic origin word algebra, but its origin is a distant memory. The colonized world was a crucial contributor of the knowledge of algebra. The unconscious colonization. The highly influenced representation of colonialism and neocolonialism in video games has seen little to no attention, as I've stated earlier. Even though the representation at times is discriminatory and is prejudice, it's thus perpetuating inequalities and feelings and negative feelings and behaviors that are evoked during the eras that are frequently represented. And a lot of children use PlayStations and video games, and it is the representation of colonialism and neocolonialism in video games is something that we need to and needs to be looked at. Colonial education succeeded in making Africans ready to be servant or subordinate for subordinate positions. However, the script is now changing, and the African's ambition is met with challenges. Native languages is a tool to fight the oppressive challenge with the colonizers. For example, if one wants to work for the United Nations, they need to be able to speak one of the languages, which is the principal languages, which is French, or English. And if a person is unable or has challenges to do so, it's going to be quite challenging to get a post within the United Nations. We certainly need to strengthen the use of our languages, our native languages, and culture in various areas. For example, the education systems, institutions, the workplaces, the press, and many more. The language relationship with the mind, the soul, and the identity and thought of those who speak in their mother tongue is thus affecting how we treat each other. This makes most of colonist societies to colonize other societies, focusing on language and language identity of those societies. This resulting in unfortunate hate crimes, femicides, transphobia, xenophobia, to name a few. It is safe to say that language is a colonizer, while the idea that our identity is jeopardized and we concentrate on how we use language. The language we use to decolonize, unfortunately, is the language that was used to colonize. The curricula and the society and communities that we live in today, within the valid levels and the curriculum and within the valid levels in learning. Selection of the curriculum, and right now I'm speaking in English. The selection of the curriculum and knowledge content design in schools and universities and professional development courses have encountered the subordinate treatment. With the West's claim to knowledge of the East, for example, gave the West the power to name and the power to control. This concept is essential to understanding of colonialism and therefore recognizing post-colonialism and colonization that's still in our midst. Fanon defines decolonization as a program of complete disorder, for it is the meeting of two opposing forces. The first encounter is marked by violence, and conciliation is impossible. Fanon further notes that the native turns on the fear in the settler's mind, and making the settler bitter and defensive. in context of the democratic era that we are in, we have seen bleeding generations fighting each other, killing each other in South Africa, Ghana, Kenya, to name a few. The recent in Sudan, the recent violent riots, for example, the recent violent riots and looting in the Gauteng and KwaZulu-Natal province saw the youth of 1976 and June 16 with the Fees Must Fall campaign, the Roads Must Fall campaign, and many more, proving that change does not mean that things have changed or that things have improved. Things might have changed, but they might not have improved. Those of us who do use English do so in spite of our ambiguity towards it. Or perhaps because of that. Perhaps because we can find in that linguistic struggle a reflection of other struggles taking place in the real world, the struggles taking between the cultures within ourselves, the influences at work upon our societies to conquer English, maybe to complete the process of making ourselves free. Salman Rushdie. Our approach to the education system should change. It is essential to have education beneficial to all and ensuring it achieves its full potential. Education is foolproof that this is possible. Egypt is foolproof. Egypt is the only country on the continent that has achieved equal education for all. And in brief, major training that shelters any country's future must have a pivotal party and cherish sociable equity. The education systems need to take back the power and redefining the purpose to fit the learning needs and the sustainable development across the continent, taking away the concentration on passing and formalism in the classroom. The goal for education is not only just to pass. Having noted that, it will be assumed that the education of the new generation must be aligned with the higher good, as has always been acclaimed throughout history, and that the higher good in a modern knowledge economy associated with socio-economic principles of a democracy requires a review of how learners are equipped to engage with the modern economy. The challenge of defining what teachers are doing or should be doing in classrooms applies everywhere. But it is noted that learner-centered education in least developed countries, the debate is linked to an urgent need to align forces for addressing conditions of extreme underdevelopment and promoting future development. That makes this debate even more complex and relates to ideological assumptions about education. the curriculum to be specific, development, and about what is right and necessary for the people. An interdisciplinary method to find a compatible collaboration might be advisable, with blending and linking of concepts, information, and ideas to achieve a more holistic understanding of the issue at hand. However, this has sparked another debate on how then we can create an equal exchange of knowledge between local links in the various communities. And education is then assumed to be the key to development, and then on its own, what is then development on its own needs to be redefined. What is development, and what kind of development are we looking for? You said sustainable. What does sustainable development mean to us? And does the education systems that we have meet the sustainable development that we see, that each country sees for themselves in the next 50, 10, 25 years, 50 years? The problem with selection then is that it is powerfully political, no matter which way you look at it. Superficially, learner-centered education approach, which is free, creative, self-organizing, and available, can be used in public and private schools or institutions. But the harsh reality is that it is dangerous and hardly practical in a divided and fundamentally unequal society. It is likely to lead to the under-education of millions of poor people the world over, trapping us still in a condition of poverty and ignorance. The easy answer is to take the best of both approaches and open some of the lines of selection while keeping an eye on the bigger picture. It is likely what happens in quite a high degree in the so-called privileged schools and universities of the day. But even then, it is important that the door of selection of content be opened wide for critical assessment, at least, and that opportunities for self-study are incorporated within a basic education on all levels of education, actually, exactly to protect us from the dangers of mind control on the one hand, and enable engagement with the rapidly tech environment, tech knowledge economy. Once again, I think it's important that we look into this. The debate is decolonizing educational analysis is centered on efficacy, with an emphasis on understanding the external factors that impact education. Learner-centered education pedagogy is the preferred pedagogy for development, especially in the developing world. The question that arises is, why are standards of performance and competency dropping in Africa? This raises numerous questions about content selection. How does the material get selected? By who? Is the material translated? And who are the translators of the material for the content to be more accessible to the local community? And which language is preferred for which material in which country, and has it been appropriate for better access and preservation of content? The provision of education for all is the initial start to the decolonization of education. However, the significant element of smooth transition of this continental objective is to treat the knowledge and information with equal, treat the information equally, whether it is from the north or from the south, whether with no prejudice, and thus disseminate the information equally across, with no discrimination of where the information comes from and how it came about. Africa needs to redefine what education means, what is the most accurate purpose, and how the degrees that people have accumulated can be utilized. Some people say they have degrees. Right now we have young people with degrees and they're sitting at home and they try and find jobs, and unfortunately there are no jobs. So how can those degrees that people have accumulated can be utilized? Rediscovering the African identity and building a society that has values it upholds. Somewhat tentative calls have been made to re-educate our society about Ubuntu back in 2007. The big concepts, for example, the big ask from anyone who's listening to this paper, this presentation, who's watching this presentation, the big ask is that we need to have researchers writing in their native languages, and thus getting the information closer to the people. In conclusion, as games are part of and perpetuate past and present global power structures in relation to inequalities, it is necessary for future research to be conducted to explore the relationship between colonialism and post-colonial agendas and video games. Educational practice should probably begin with an openness and sensitivity to contextual factors, making sure that context, content, and pedagogical processes that are utilized are firstly not at odds with the local culture, and secondly are served by a well-trained and well-supported team of professionals. The knowledge economy of this millennium is different to the old one, to the old way. And clearly new skills and new understandings are required to negotiate meaning and productivity in a way that builds sustainability in community rather than serves the rampant desires of an elite army of capitalist innovators. The idea of treating each other, the them and the us, with an understanding of the idea of treating each other with this them, the them, the us, is something that needs to die, that needs to no longer exist within Africa. With an understanding of power and independence can be a burden at times in education and society, knowledge and information sharing, and society at large. A knowledge economy that is truthful and not weighed. We need a knowledge economy that is truthful and that does not wait for people to tell our truth. We can tell our own truth. Our own researchers using native languages can tell our own truth. We can tell, then learn to understand what really happened. In that way, we can then learn how to understand what really happened and thus be able to create the Africa we desire. Thank you. And these are references for the paper. And if anyone has any further questions, feedback, greatly appreciated. Any feedback, advice, you can find me on WhatsApp. That's I think, yeah, that's my WhatsApp number, and on email, which is MZNBAB. Oh, the A needs it's BAB. Remove there's an error. That second A needs to be removed. 001@myuct.ac.za. Thank you.